right. Happy Tuesday. It's Tuesday. It's only been a month, and I'm getting used to this new date and time thing. It still throws me off every single week. But I'm back exploring the landscape of learning and workplace tech with my JD. I think you are the second guest to have been on the show 3 times. So you and Ben Eubanks, Ben, if you're listening or watching, you're going to have to catch up now because JD's right on your heels. And if I remember right, JD, I think we agreed the whole episode was going to be a conversation about the CSOD EdCast conversation. Was that right? Or was it we were not going to talk about that? That's exactly what it was.
I haven't read any articles about it, so
I haven't seen a thing. This is like news to me. No, in all seriousness, though, whenever we get together, we always have a really good conversation because we're bringing light to the frontline workers side of every organization, which makes up a huge portion of the workforce, which I think in every conversation we say it goes overlooked way too much. Would you agree?
Yes. And it's just, for those who might not know Axonify, we focus on providing technology, content, and services that enable frontline workers in spaces like grocery, retail, finance and insurance, hospitality, and the like. So the people that you as a customer most often directly interact with and recognize as the brand of the organization you're dealing with, whether it's the delivery driver who dropped off your groceries today, or the person at the cashier counter, the person behind the deli counter, all of those types of folks. That's the audience that we specifically focus on when it comes to enabling an improved workplace experience, especially through learning and communication technology and content. So that's what we do.
I'm going to pause you there. Yep. I like the fact that you actually took the time to define it, because the term frontline workers does get tossed around a lot. And I don't know that everybody always has a grounding on what do we actually mean when we say that.
Yeah, I often... No problem, because everyone, it's easiest to define the audience based on the interaction we have with them in our everyday lives as customers, not necessarily, learning and development employees. But the kind of additional caveat is how do I define frontline worker? It's the people who work directly with your customers and or your products every day. So they may be customer facing, like in a retail store, or they may be back of house in a logistics operation within a retail environment, but they're specifically working with, the products every day if they're not necessarily talking to customers. But it's that workforce that has become meaningfully more prominent in conversations over the past couple of years because of the role that they've played in helping us get through the challenges that we've all faced. And now I think what's most important is making sure that organizations have learned something over the past 2 years and leverage that new insight they have into the importance of this workforce, not just during times of exceptional disruption, but what it has taken to enable and empower that workforce and help them work through the change and the struggle that we faced forever, it feels at this point, and carry that forward and say that not just because we owe them, but because we've always owed them, right? These people didn't become important in the last 2 years. They've always been important. But now as the labor market has changed and people have realized, as people have more options and are making different decisions and changing their relationship with work, no longer can you just rely on having 180% turnover and being able to keep going, right? So the needs, the talent and kind of knowledge and skill capability of frontline employees has changed. What they need to be capable of is different now than it was even 2 years ago. And your ability to find people who will do that work is different. And I get the sense that there are a lot of organizations that are waiting for things to go back, for there suddenly to be a crop of 16-year-olds who just want to work in your store. And you can just survive by saying, we've got some veterans who've been here for a while, and we're just going to churn through younger employees who this isn't a career for them, like those types of things. That's not this world that we are now in, because people have choices when it comes to how they work, where they work, who they work for. And it's no longer a regional conversation, right? It's not about, I have to work within a certain distance from my home. My company's in Canada. I'm in Orlando, hence the Mickey Mouse. So we have to build our talent base around those realities across the entire organization, inclusive of the frontline. And that means transforming the nature of frontline work so that it's not perceived as just a job. It's perceived as a place where I can generate opportunity. I can do my best every day. And it's going to enable me to build knowledge and skills that are going to be useful moving forward, whether it's at this company or where I eventually want to go when it comes to my career aspirations.
So I'm going to, on that one, and I'm going to limit how much I talk because somebody else said I'm not going, because I hear it, so JD, you're not, but I am. I don't know what's going on. I'm just going to ask some very thoughtful questions, and then let you respond to them as much as I can. But with that, over the past couple of years, this is a conversation that's happening a lot. As you talk to folks dealing with frontline workers, what are some of the biggest contributors to this? Because I mean, literally, I've been in conversations where people go, where are these people going? And they're still here, but what are you seeing happening with it?
So just to summarize the question and get you to talk again, is it like, why can't people hire frontline employees?
Yeah, and some perceptions are gone. I actually heard somebody go, it's just like, did they disappear? They just not working? And it's not that, they're still here.
Yeah, 100%. So I think for a long time, organizations have had the perspective that people need to earn the job. And as a result, they didn't shape jobs in a way that people would want to work there. So now the conversation is flipped, and now the job has to earn the employee. And I think every organization, again, this isn't just a frontline conversation, this is everybody, has to take a hard look at the jobs that they have in their organization and the work they expect and the experience they provide, and ask the question seriously, why would someone want to do that? Right? And I think we've just assumed that there's just an infinite supply of part-time employees who aren't going to take this. They're going to do they're going to do hard work. They're going to do it well, but this isn't, they don't need to have opportunity here. Like, this isn't a career. And I think the good news is that I see more and more organizations realizing that, as an example, in retail, we have to get back to a place where a retail job can equal an opportunity to enter into a retail career. And we look more broadly at our entire workforce when we design the experience, right? To say that, we're looking at how we can promote opportunity across not just the corporate workforce and figure out how we can move players in that space, but how do we look at maybe 400,000 people who work here and say, the person who can fill this corporate job is actually currently working in a store, but we don't know that. So how do we create an experience and leverage opportunity more meaningfully so that people can find that opportunity and foster career development? And then as L&D, we can come in and say, well, we can help you do your best work today and help build the skills you're going to need for tomorrow, because there's opportunities all over this organization that previously you just didn't have access to, because to a lot of people, their frontline job and the company they work for is that space, right? So I may work for a giant company, but what I know of it is my store. And then what I'm told that is happening outside of my store. That's not how work works anymore. We have to connect that store to the larger network of the organization so that people see that there is more opportunity than just the job I'm doing today. And maybe it's not just what the only promotion I can get is to supervisor. Maybe not. Maybe there's another path, just like for people like us. Career path has never been a vertical conversation, or at least not for a long time for me. It's been more of a this than a this. How do we introduce that same opportunity to the entire workforce, not just the corporate team or the team who can work from home and the like? So I think it's bringing the story together, but then understanding the unique nature and challenges of frontline work, because frontline workers can't make the decision in most cases to say, I want to tune into this Zoom conversation or this live stream and learn something new today, maybe, or just listen to this guy rant because the other guy can't talk. How do we look at the reality of what it's like to be a retail employee, a grocery employee, a logistics employee, and say, well, in order to enable these people to seek these opportunities, to open those doors, we have to look at their everyday workflow and figure out, where does learning fit in, right? Where does education fit in? How does skill development fit in? And I know you're chatting with Matthew Daniel from Guild coming up soon, who has a clear perspective on that as well, where does education fit in to open the door to opportunity? At Axonify, it's where does training and enablement fit in to open the door to opportunity? So I think it's not just about, we've reimagined a lot of the frontline work experience over the past 2 years, right? Wages we've been taking a hard look at. Hiring bonuses have been deployed. Education benefits have become more and more popular. But have we taken a hard look at the job itself? And then back to what I originally said, ask the question, why should someone want to do this? And then answer that question with all of the support and the process and the tools necessary to make that job something someone wants to step into versus something that we're desperate to fill.
So, and again, I'm going to limit how much I say, thinking of the end user experience on this, because who wants to hear double with me? But Sonia asked a question, made a comment. I think what you're getting at is that it's really a fundamental mindset shift of not looking at frontline workers as disposable, right? As a disposable resource. So it sounds like it's maturing. But what are you seeing as some of the hurdles still for organizations? It sounds like some of it is people are still approaching it from like, can we throw enough benefits at this to make the suck acceptable?
Yeah, like I said, I think it begins with, I haven't seen a ton of organizations take a hard look at the work itself and say, is this something people are going to want to do and want to do for an extended period of time? Again, every organization is going to be different. The types of work, even if everyone's in retail, retail jobs are different between different types of retailers. So take a hard look at what the job is. I think another question mark is management. For the past 2 years, we can talk about burnout being the number one cause of turnover in frontline employees right now. But we can't forget that managers are included in that stat too, and what managers have gone through, whether it's department managers, store managers, shift managers, in trying to keep their operations moving and trying to support their people over this period of time. And are they being enabled properly, right? Are they the right people to create the experience that an employee needs to say, yes, I enjoy this work. I'm having a good time here. I'm learning here. And this is something I want to continue doing. Because again, so much of the employee experience in frontline, and this was true when I was a frontline employee and frontline manager at companies like Disney and AMC, the experience, giant company, but the experience was my team. And my manager had an incredible influence over what I thought of my job. Yeah. I could have liked the work I was doing, but if the manager could have made it even better, or the manager could have made it a horrific experience. So are we taking a hard look at the role that managers play, making sure that the right people are in those roles, not just people who are good at the job, people who have
in the people leader roles you're talking about.
Yes, so people who have the right skills to step into, the right temperament, the right ability to interact with people, and are we also giving those people the right support so that we're setting them up for success, and we're not saying, oh, the manager left. Who's the most senior person here? Who's the best salesperson here? Well, now you're in charge of the team, and the next manager training program is in 6 months, right? That fosters an environment where if they don't just have natural gifts to be a manager, they're taking the entire workplace experience down with them. Yeah. So how do we reimagine the ways that we look at the manager role, recognize the critical nature of it in the frontline workforce, and enable it accordingly, versus maybe how we've looked at kind of management training in the past, which has never quite hit the mark.
Okay. So twofold on that one. I'm curious from a learning and development standpoint. Are you seeing orgs that are doing this well? And if so, what are some of the things? I mean, because you can throw training at it, but it's got to be bigger than just here's some training to make this happen. So how are people doing it well?
Yeah, so I think there's a bunch of different factors to consider. One is kind of taken right off the top is communication and kind of creating that connection between people and the larger organization. And historically, frontline communication in a lot of cases has been a game of telephone, or at least an inconsistent set of practices where maybe this store had a WhatsApp group and that store had a Facebook group, but all the communication was still funneled through email to the manager, and then whatever they deemed important hit the frontline workforce on whatever timeline they desired, or if someone was available, was in the pre-shift meeting, they know and other people don't know. So I think recognizing that communication is a critical part of the story because it establishes that connection between me as the employee and the larger organization. So I understand what's happening, what the priorities are, why I'm being asked to do different types of things. So organizations that I've seen excel over the past 2 years have really prioritized communication as a key part of the story and not separated it from learning and development, because it's part of the same overall narrative, just using different tactics, potentially different tools, and the like. So there's
Do you
that.
think on that one,
yeah,
some of that's connected to the disposable mindset, where it's kind of like, they don't really need to know all this corporate stuff. They just need to do that. Do you think that contributes to it?
I think it's less that. I don't think there's anyone out there that's broadly said, we don't need to tell the employees what they need to know to do their job, right? I do think there is still a lot of red tape and political consideration around how communication, like when should we tell people, and like a bit of over planning, as if internal communication is an external marketing and PR move, and holding back, and there's questions of trust and things like that. So I think that's still at play, but I do think a lot of it was just tactical problems where technologically a lot of frontline employees have not historically used the device. Right. So how do I reach that workforce? Well, I can't reach them digitally because they're not holding a device. They're not sitting in front of a laptop. They're not using Microsoft Teams. So how do I get to them? Well, I default to sending flyers that get posted in the store. Maybe I have a break room with a kiosk, or maybe there's a screen in the break room that shows slides about company updates and things like that. But those mechanisms don't move quickly. They're not personal. They're one way. They don't allow a two-way engagement. And then you saw over the last couple of years, especially, a lot of managers step in, like I said earlier, and install their own tactics and mechanisms, right? Where it's, we've got a group chat going on or something to that effect. But that,
or a morning huddle or whatever.
Yeah. So there's technology being introduced in some cases, but it actually opens the door to additional risk for the business, additional inconsistency in practices where one team's handling communication one way versus the rest of the company. So now I think that the past couple of years have shifted the relationship between the frontline workforce and technology, where suddenly devices were pushed into people's hands, where now we have mobile devices because we're actually picking customer orders inside the grocery store. So now a lot of employees are walking around with Zebra handhelds in order to execute their job. Or we're looking at devices differently in terms of how can we use the devices that people are sitting in front of every day that maybe previously weren't considered training and communication tools, but now we can.
Or we told people we didn't want you using it.
Yeah. Or now we can look at that point of sale system, or look at the scale in the deli, and look at the screens that are emerging as technology is changing, and say we can use these tools for different reasons. And it doesn't have to be an L&D owned device or a dedicated device for training to be used for those purposes. And I think communication actually swings that door open, because while I think there's a bit of a mindset shift required to talk about what could training look like in the front line beyond onboarding, right? What's the value of continuous learning, and how do you fit that into the workflow? Communication's a bit of a no-brainer. People need the most recent update. They do. Well, how do we leverage technology differently to get there? That starts a conversation. It even starts the BYOD conversation. Even there's still hurdles in terms of different requirements. People have to be on shift, data security considerations. So, but all of that can be tackled with the right technology. We can solve all of those problems. And when you solve them, to solve a problem that is more readily recognized, like communication, and now you start being able to reach people with more timely information to enable them to do their job, it's not a far step to then start talking about, well, let's talk about training and how we can actually evolve that story, improve your onboarding, get people into the operation faster, and actually skill people up as part of their job, and not leave it to be something that happens every once in a while. Because again, historically, we couldn't reach this audience. So we've kind of adopted certain practices that don't need to be the mainstay anymore, like going to that back room, that one computer, and doing an hour's worth of e-learning because that's the only hour I got with you for this quarter. We don't have to think that way anymore.
So on that, with this, and sometimes I think in L&D we try and say learning communications, and we intentionally push a divide between it, saying that's not us. But if I'm hearing you, some of the orgs that are doing this successfully are using communications as almost a Trojan horse.
as a door opener. Trojan horse is a little bit like the communication didn't matter. I was here for the training all the time. But yes, acknowledging they're part of the same story. And even if every company I've ever worked for had separate functions where there was kind of ops communication and the learning and development function. And in a lot of cases, I as L&D had to ask permission from ops to talk to my audience or get information to them. I had to go through this other route. And it's still the case in a lot of organizations where there are different stakeholders in play. But when we get to the shared conversation, we realize, what are we all trying to do? We're trying to get people information so that they can change their behavior and improve the way they do their jobs. Yes, there's a difference between getting a quick update, reading it, knowing the information, and making slightly different decisions on the job, upselling a different product, or setting up a new display. That is different than building robust skills that require more instructional support, reinforcement, performance support. Those are not the exact same thing, but they're part of the same story, because you can't learn if you don't know, right? You can't do if you don't know, and you don't know what to learn if you're not aware. And communication drives that initial awareness of what's important, what are the priorities, what are we working on, so that you can then focus that energy and effort to learning the right things, developing the right skills. So it needs to be part of the same overall workplace experience and coordinated as such. And I think technology is allowing us, both hardware and software, allowing us to do it in ways that even 2 years ago, either organizations weren't ready for, or we just didn't have the tools in place that we now have today.
Okay. So another comment from Sonia on this one, and I'm curious your take on this. I've got a point of view, but I'll limit it because of the echo. But with the pandemic stuff, how much of this do you think has been exacerbated, maybe made worse by it, and how much of it really has always been there, but we just maybe didn't notice it as much?
Most of it has always been there, and it's unfortunate how many times I run into stories and experiences in frontline organizations that echo my own. And I haven't been a frontline employee for 15 plus years, and I've been a frontline manager for about 12 at this point. And yet, a lot of the challenges organizations are facing are the same ones that I faced when I was not in L&D formally and I was in those types of roles. The last 2 years have just accelerated our understanding of the difficulties that these challenges introduce. Where before, not being able to reach my team with a timely update, we can wait for the next shift huddle, right? If someone's not working today, their peers will tell them it's fine. The last 2 years created a level of urgency around getting information out, confirming that people knew, confirming that people were going to change the way that they were working, that the disconnects, the lack of channels, the lack of reach, suddenly, I think, woke a lot of people up to say, well, we can't run our business this way. This is inherently causing consequences. We're not as agile as we need to be right now. And it's because we haven't invested in shaping an experience that brought everyone with us, right? And it's kind of similar with Teams. The evolution of Teams and Slack across a remote or increasingly remote workforce. Remote work wasn't created in the last 2 years. It suddenly exploded because the relationship people have to work in their workplace changed, and technology fostered that. I was using Zoom and Slack and whatnot, and I've been a remote employee for the last decade. And now people are kind of catching up to the experience that I've been having for a long time, because now organizations are realizing, oh, people can work at home. I can trust people to do their jobs and not physically see them. We can collaborate in different ways. There are still shortcomings in this experience, 100%. But it's just people are waking up to it or seeing the opportunity presented by making those changes because we had to do certain things over the past couple of years.
Okay. So what are some of the pitfalls then that people are making as they go into this? I mean, because again, whenever you get something thrown into hyperspeed over 2 years and they go, this isn't working, we just now realize how bad this is. There are real consequences to things we were going, it's fine. What are the mistakes that you're seeing people are making for folks who may be going, we got to do something, but we don't want to make the wrong plays?
I think it's less about mistakes and more about we're in a meaningful moment where hopefully we get to look back and not have to keep reacting and ask questions about, well, why did we make certain changes? Why did we adopt certain practices? And did they work? And should they stay? Or were they just what we needed to do? And we actually shouldn't continue to adopt or shouldn't continue to pursue those ideas. And I said recently in a presentation that when it comes to learning and development, in a lot of cases, I don't think digital learning evolved in the past 2 years. I think it moved, right? I think learning went to technology, but the modalities didn't necessarily shift. We took instructor-led experiences and did our best to put them online because we had to. Now is the time to look at that evolution of practice and say, did we make the right moves? Did it make sense? Did we actually transform the way that we're enabling people? Or did it just move? And now we have to sit here and say, did the move work? Is the move sustainable? Is it now time to really take a look at how we transform the way we're supporting a hybrid workforce? And the same then applies to the front line to say, what moves have we made? What investments have we made? And what do we need to do now? Because the workforce isn't coming back, right? The great resignation thing is a gigantic misnomer because this is just the way employment works now, right? It's not a great anything. It's a people have reassessed their relationship to work and now they're making different decisions. So now it's incumbent upon employers to say, how am I going to evolve to fit into this world? Because now employees get to make the call when it comes to where they spend their time. So on the front line, it comes down to what types of investments can we make to not only make sure people are able to do their job, we're able to run our businesses with the staffing levels that we're now going to have, but how do we help introduce new opportunity so that employees see the value in investing their time in our business and we're able to grow them so that we're creating our own talent base, right? We're creating our own tool and our pool and bench strength. And we're not relying on having to go out and hire people that are specialists anymore or hiring a manager when the manager leaves. No, we're consistently building a talent pool within our store so that the next managers are always being developed and we can leverage that talent and motivate people to seek that capability so that we can create a more agile workplace. But it's not just for the business. It's an opportunity for the people that we need to create that opportunity for the business, if that made sense.
Which is the whole employee experience side. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm curious on the skills side of this, because going back to the very beginning of the conversation where folks might have thought this audience was thought of as disposable or expendable, and now they're realizing they're not. They may not have the visibility into the skills or what skills do we really have, how do we know what we have, how do we mobilize them. Where are organizations on that maturity curve and where are they getting started? Because that's a big piece. Otherwise, it's like, well, I don't know what to do with these people.
It's one of the biggest conversations we have when Axonify gets introduced into an organization, because suddenly you have the ability to gain a nuanced understanding of what your people can do. Where today, if I think back to my days at Disney, and I was a manager at the busiest roller coaster on earth, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, how did I know what my team was capable of? Well, I knew that at a basic level, they had been trained to perform their role. So their role meant they could do certain things. And I made that assumption because training had certified them and they were being scheduled into those positions. But beyond that,
the capability piece, you knew to do this, you have to do this thing.
Yeah. But how did I know who the right person was to ask to go outside when Thunder Mountain was closed and have conversations with very angry guests? How did I know? It was anecdotal. How did I know when we were experiencing a technical problem and I had to send someone to a certain place to have a conversation with maintenance? Who's the right person? It was just because I had built enough of a relationship with my team to know who certain people were. But was I potentially missing people who had ability that I didn't see? 100%. Or maybe had interest in growing certain abilities, but I just didn't know they had those interests. 100%. So the question then becomes, and what we introduce as Axonify is the ability to measure at a more granular level, not just what people have been trained in, but what they actually know and what they're actually doing on the job. So that instead of it being which managers on which shift and who you see doing certain things and assuming, oh, that person's great, but they're actually a really good suck up. And they do a great job when you're around. But what are they doing elsewhere? What do their peers think of them? It could be a completely different story.
Or even your own proximity bias. Yes. I think that this goes back to extroversion and introversion. The person who's talking all the time, you're like, oh, they're great.
Or maybe. A big pile of other biases can come into that play as well, right? So rather than make it all about the judgment call, we can introduce data to the story to say, these people are struggling in these areas. You might not see it because you only see them perform these tasks, not these tasks. But this group over here is excelling in these areas. They have proven knowledge in this area, proven capability in this area. So when it comes time to say, okay, we have a supervisor position open or a department manager position open, who are the right people to consider? It's not just who the managers like, right? You can take a look at the types of data Axonify generates and say, these are the people who have proven that they're able to do these types of jobs. This might be where we want to start the conversation. Some people may want to take that next step. Some people maybe aren't ready or not interested. They like their current job. So it could become a more informed conversation because of the way we introduce continuous learning into the day-to-day workflow. It's not just about getting people training as part of their shift. It's about using that experience to measure where their strengths are, where their opportunities are, and then surface that to the right people so that not only can managers make informed decisions, the L&D team can look at that and say, well, people are struggling in this area. Maybe that's where we need to dedicate more resources when it comes to additional content, additional types of training. But in this area, people are showing clear expertise, right? Our business knows this area of the business. Well, we don't have to put a lot of resources there. Maybe that's more of just performance support resources go over
there's
there.
just more tribal knowledge even supported when you have departures.
Yeah. And it's always interesting when we do a lot of measurement. When we first get involved, there's a baseline measurement exercise that takes place in Axonify. And it's always interesting to validate what the workforce does and doesn't know. And it kind of goes in two directions. In one case, L&D may be shocked that they were planning to launch a training program around a particular topic, but maybe instead of launching a fully blown designed course, right? We start by using some assessment questions to gain an understanding of what people know, and knowledge is much higher than they assumed. So like you said, there's tribal or tacit knowledge out there. People know. We don't need to train them. They've already got it. Let's respect that existing knowledge and focus our resources in some other direction. Or it goes the other direction. People think they know, but that baseline knowledge is actually shockingly low. And suddenly we have a new priority because we just assumed, well, people got the training, but they actually didn't retain anything. So their knowledge of this very important topic in the workplace is much lower. That's where we actually need to spend our time and focus area. And it's not just for L&D to recognize that. It's often fun when you start to introduce kind of daily training to a frontline workforce. There are going to be some people who've been there forever, right? They've worked in the store for 20 years and they're the kind of go-to person, right? It's Jill. Everyone always asks Jill. Jill knows all of the things, right? But then Jill starts to get engaged in these daily training sessions. And I was actually an Axonify customer. So I had these interactions as an L&D manager. And people would say, I don't need this training, right? I've worked here for 20 years. Why would I need this?
All this stuff.
And then you get them to engage. And oftentimes I would say, it's not about, like, we know, but like, we want to challenge, like, this is a new challenge. Show us, like, your knowledge, right? Like,
here's an opportunity for you to demonstrate it.
Prove. Like, we will see you at the top, right? You will earn the achievements, right? This is your opportunity to demonstrate that mastery we know you have. And then they go in and they start engaging in scenarios and answering questions, and they don't know everything.
Yeah.
And it's fun to shock people kind of back to reality, to say, you had a bit of overconfidence, and it's understandable completely. And you know a lot of things, but there are certain gaps in your knowledge. Now you know. So you can focus on closing those gaps and ascending back to the top of the mountain, where you will be the subject matter expert everyone goes to. But it's interesting when you introduce these opportunities to people react differently and see value differently. But in every case, it's helping them get better, right? It's helping introduce meaningful learning experiences as part of their job. And even in Axonify, we talk a lot about what can we do in 3 to 5 minutes a day? Because if you're a contact center agent, you don't have time.
That's all you got.
You are managed to the minute. We can get 3 minutes. We can get a 3-minute task out of the system before you got to make your next phone call. How can we use those 3 minutes to help you get a little bit better, expose you to some new information, help you practice something about your job? And it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you do 3 minutes every shift, it starts to add up, and it quickly becomes more time dedicated to training than you historically get when you pull people out of the contact center floor for, an hour once a quarter to give people all the updates. And by the way, when you fire hose people with the updates, they don't remember it anyway. So it was a waste of time. So 3 to 5 minutes a day doesn't sound like a lot, but when it's all people have, or, as L&D, I can't change the retail workflow. I can't say you have to schedule people differently for learning purposes. I have to go to the reality that people work in. But when you put the right experience into that workflow, it adds up quickly over time, and it allows people to not just get better at their job today, but start to seek those additional opportunities, build skills that are going to help them become the next key holder, the next assistant manager, or maybe seek out different roles in the organization because they're building new skills.
Okay. So with the skills piece, curious on this as we kind of keep unpacking it. There is a lot of talk about skills half-life shrinking and all this other stuff, the complexity of all that. Like you said, some of the problems we're dealing with in the pandemic are the same ones we've been dealing with 14 years ago. What about skills? Are you seeing on the front lines wildly different skills than we've ever had before? Are they different flavors? What's happening there?
I haven't read an article about skills conversations recently, or skills gaps, or skills ontologies or marketplaces, so I don't know what you're talking about again. But yes, so it is.
There's only one out there.
The difference, I would say, in the conversation around skills with the frontline workforce is that skills are much more clearly understood, right? They're clearly defined. What I need someone to do in a logistics operation who is picking product off of a shelf and needs to do it safely and efficiently, that has been worked through many times to clarify exactly what that person does on their job, much more so than my job, right? If I try to define the skills required to do my job and then measure myself up against them and try to scale that across my company, let's take like presentation skills as an example, right? What is presentation skills? How does it break down into a measurable set of objects?
What's good? What's bad?
And how do you possibly measure that across multiple people? Because people do certain types of things differently at work. They execute skills differently. They have different talents in different areas. So I think it allows us to wrap our arms around this kind of notion of skill in a different way when it comes to the frontline workforce. Because for a delivery driver, a grocery store produce clerk, a retail cashier, it's much more clear exactly what's expected of them, and as a result, what skills they have to build to execute their job in a measurable way. And they've been measured in different ways for a long time, whether it be customer satisfaction, sales, efficiency metrics, productivity metrics. There's a lot of KPIs wrapped around frontline work that we can lean into as learning and development to kind of connect the dots to say, is the training impacting the results, and are they the right skills we're focused on or the wrong skills? And in one case, there was one project we worked with a large logistics provider. I'll put it that way. Company ships a lot of things. Make up who you think it is. And their goal was to increase the efficiency of packing a truck, right? Because they make more money when more things get on that truck. And it's like a Tetris game, right? To pack the truck when it goes out for delivery, to get the most things in there, maximize the routes, et cetera. So they had built training around a specific set of skills that were required to pack the truck to ultimate efficiency, maximize return on investment. What they found was we executed the program and then we measured changes in performance and changes in output, the business result, right? The efficiency of the trucks. And we found no change. The training did not change anything about the outputs they saw. And what that allowed them to do, the measurement that came from that, was back away and say, were we looking at the right skills or did we miss the mark there? And what they actually figured out was the skills that were most important for packing that truck had nothing to do with packing the truck. It was how the employee moved through the facility in order to acquire the items that were going to go on the truck. It was not the packing of the truck itself. So there was an assumption as to the skills required to execute the job effectively that was wrong. The only reason we noticed was because we were measuring elements of the experience that allow us to connect the dots and say, training is not impacting result. And then when they make the change, we now see, okay, training is starting to change the result that they were looking for. So when it comes to wrap it up, the skills conversation, I believe it's much more concrete and much more measurable in frontline work because frontline work is so clearly and well defined in a lot of cases. There's still a lot of variables. People do engage with customers differently, right? Customer service can look a little different, but it's because people in a lot of cases are learning to do this job for the first time, they're not being hired in with a lot of skills. Even if they've worked in a retail environment before, they're still being trained how to apply those skills here. So it's so much more granular and defined. We're able to target training much more specifically at those specific skills and then measure the influence that they have on results for the organization. So I think it's a much more concrete conversation than it is in kind of the HR space or the corporate space where, you can't really double click into a lot of the skills conversations, right? Like it stays at a high level, like presentation skills, has them or not. And that's a capability more so than a skill. A skill has to be that granularly defined thing I can see you do. And how do you measure skill across a corporate organization where no one really sees them applied on a consistent basis? It turns into a lot of 360 assessment and that kind of stuff. And then you have to wonder, how effective is the assessor at judging your high level capability versus your granular actual skill set? Yeah. A lot of things.
And I think technology is helping there, but I think your point that people can take back from this from Frontline is there's actually a lot we can learn from this. It's a good incubator for some of the stuff that can be applied to corporate versus the other way around. Yeah. We're like, let's solve it over here in this impossible feat and then roll it back.
Yep, 100%.
Okay. So I am curious. Do you see nuances in this? On a global level? I mean, are there nuances in different regions, things like that, or is it pretty consistent?
Nuances in what?
Maybe how people are approaching this, the maturity of where people are on the spectrum as it comes to frontline workers. Are you seeing different regions move quicker and adapt faster?
I don't think so. If anything, I mean, I wouldn't want to say North America lags, but I think in some cases North America lags in these areas because in certain factors, let's say. So let's take technology as an example with hardware. Okay. Mobile device usage is much more common outside of the United States than it is in the United States when it comes to frontline work. Okay. Some of that is regulatory differences in terms of what people are and are not allowed to do, and some of it's cultural considerations, right? But if I break apart Axonify's kind of mobile device usage, it is higher outside of the US than it is within the US. And part of that is also kind of technology baggage, right? In a lot of places in the world, there wasn't an existing setup, an existing PC that was used for certain purpose, or at home, the mobile phone may be the device that people use, right? They don't flip over to a laptop. They use their phone for everything. So the technology realities are different. That allows different types of strategy to be deployed at different speed. But we're seeing that pick up in North America, where more and more CTOs are asking the question, how do I get BYOD to work? How do I overcome some of the red tape considerations? And we work with organizations on that. Beyond that, I think the only real differences are that there are certain kind of regional implications when it comes to, worker councils in certain parts of the world. So you have to look at the story differently, just like you would in a unionized environment in North America. So really taking into account how work is done, the relationship people have with work in different parts of the world is important. But in terms of people realizing the need to prioritize and enable frontline workers, I see eyes opening all around the world. So I don't think it's explicitly happening in one place, not another. Just what it takes to implement that strategy might be a little bit different based on the way people think about work.
Okay. So question from Sonia on this one. From a manufacturing standpoint, if you were to look in that industry specifically, are there nuances that you're seeing there, things that are really changing in that space on the front line more than others? I'm curious the nuance.
So the conversations I have in a manufacturing space are a little bit different because the requirements are different, right? So the idea of the first thing we do when we walk into an organization as Axonify is take a hard look at the day-to-day workflow of the audience that we're looking to support. And in a manufacturing environment, there's a lot of firm realities when it comes to it being a safety critical environment where people are very focused on the task at hand, and removing one person could potentially stop the line, right? So it's kind of like a contact center in that regard in terms of how closely focused the worker experience is. And then it challenges us to say, well, if we want to introduce communication and training into this person's workflow, how do we do that? So in this case, it might not be a conversation around personal devices. There really necessarily isn't an embedded device. We don't want to distract someone that's in the manufacturing workflow at all, right? So then it becomes a question of, well, how do we take a look at other spaces or other places people spend their time? And we talk more about, kiosks in a break room and how we motivate people to engage in a couple of minutes as they're returning from break, but before they have to hit the line, and introduce again those 3 minutes of time into their day to say, how do we deliver a personalized experience in those couple of minutes? But the physical spacing changes, the devices change based on the experience that they're facing in a heavily safety critical focused environment like manufacturing. But the idea of needing to upskill my workers, the fact that I may have previously relied on legacy talent. I have people who have been here for a long time, and therefore when I hire someone in, they can bring them up to speed, and I don't need as formal, or not formal maybe, but more as a structured ongoing learning experience taking place. That is shifting, just like it's shifting in a lot of other environments, because you can't rely on people coming in with those skills or having enough people who have been around for a long time. You do have to embed continuous upskilling into the workflow and accelerate people's development, because you need to keep the line moving, right? So the mindset is shifting in that environment, just like other places, but it's shifting for different reasons based on the nature of how work is done in that environment. Hopefully that answered Sonia's question.
I think so. I think so. I'll let her comment in if she has anything else to add. On that one, as you look 5 years out, you said mobile's used more heavily outside the U.S., but again, I think mobile's a big piece. But manufacturing, you gave the example that they can't sit on a device; they're using heavy machinery. Yep. Where do you see that going in terms of greater access to things for folks?
I think device or kind of ubiquitous access is already kind of at this expectation state, right? It's the measure that we should have always been looking at has been the consumer experience, not the workplace experience, because work technology and process lags our everyday life. You don't want for information every day because you have your phone or you have whatever device that you're using. And then at work, everything changes because the experience of information and technology changes at work. I don't think people are that patient anymore, and we have to meet that bar. And then the implementation of tools like Teams, the ability to reach people quickly, the use of handheld devices in more and more frontline environments, the walls breaking down when it comes to things like BYOD. My hope is that 3 to 5 years is far off when it comes to the reality that it's just going to be what device I use at work is the device that I use to do a lot of different things. So kind of a unification of technology. And it's another thing when I talk to CIOs and CTOs, there's kind of two words that come out a lot, or kind of two sentiments that come out. And one is the term single pane of glass, right? People are looking for a unified experience that simplifies for the employee so I can get what I need to get my work done. But at the same time, they're not willing to forsake capability. So it's not a matter of finding one tool that does everything, because it doesn't exist. And we have to think more broadly than learning and development in this conversation, because we have to fit into a technology stack and experience that is the entire work experience, and learning is part of that. We can't sit over there because we know what happens. When your LMS sits over there, no one goes over there. So we talk about things like learning in the flow of work. It's has to be inclusive of all of work, not like just our resources are easier to get to via your chat app. Right? That's not the solution that we actually need to get to. It's bigger than that, and it requires a greater collaboration than that. So how do we balance, a simplified experience with the capabilities that are going to make a difference for people, especially when it comes to continuously developing the right skills, the right knowledge to accelerate their opportunity within an organization? And I think that's consolidating quickly. You started the conversation by talking about consolidation in the marketplace, but I think our eyes have to be on how do we bring together the right capabilities, whether that's through integration, whether that's a technical integration, systems actually talking, whether it's just strategically how we use different tools. But I think our challenge now in learning tech is less and less about how we reach the person, because on the front line in corporate environments, the workplace technology has evolved in a way that we now can get to people in different ways. It's how we identify the right capabilities, right? And make it not about content, make it about the experience of getting the help that you need, and through that experience, getting access to the right content and things like that. So we have to think broader about the overall kind of digitally enabled work experience and figure out where do we fit into that and where do employees need us to fit in? Because that's the other thing I have to remind people a lot is that, we're like one really small part of a lot of things people got going on. And the last thing we should do is make training feel like a chore or another box I've got to check. It has to feel like the idea of learning, while we're always learning at work, but getting the support I need to learn the right things should feel like an integrated part of my job, not, oh, I got to do that too, because the learning team, I'm going to get on a list if I don't do that thing. And then my manager's going to come and I'm on the list. And we have to escape that world. And I think technology is giving us the opportunity, but now it's, can we rethink the way that we approach what we do and help it fit into the evolved reality of the audience we support, regardless of what people do, right? Because everyone needs and deserves the support required to help them do their best work every day. And before, we had an excuse because, the 1,000 corporate workers, they're in a building, I can wrap my arms around them, they can go to the room and we can talk about the thing. That's easy. The 400,000 frontline workers, well, they're distributed across multiple countries. I can't wrap my arms around them. I have an excuse for not being able to get there. That excuse is gone, right? Technology is giving us the ability to reach. Now, can we take advantage of it so that everyone doesn't get the same experience? Because the people working in the building, the people working in the plant, the people working in the store, they're not going to get the same experience. They need an equitable experience. They need the right experience for what they need so that we can go back to where we started and say, how can we leverage our entire talent base, right? And realize that the next person to fill a position in the corporate building could be the person working in the plant. They've got the interest and the desire to do it, but can we reach them with the right developmental opportunity, skill them up so that when the opportunity's there, we can pull them into that environment and not assume we've got to hire someone when we've got tens of thousands of people that are a potential talent pool that we just have underutilized.
Okay. Well, I'm going to wrap because the echo's driving me nuts. And, if I start asking questions, we're going to go over anyway. So I think the two things that you closed on that I loved was equitable employee experience versus universal employee experience. That's a fool's errand. And then I like that single pane of glass. Rather than trying to say, can we find the one platform to solve it all? To say, well, no, but how can we strive towards that single pane of glass that people can access? I like that. Well, as always, JD, it's always a pleasure. My apologies to those listening for my echoes, but I tried to limit my talking as much as possible. So we'll get you back for number 4 and we'll get this mic thing figured out.
Appreciate it. And I'll plug that, speaking of live streams, I and my team at Axonify are kickstarting our own live stream on LinkedIn next Wednesday at 11:30 Eastern Time. Join us for the first episode of In the Know, which just coincidentally has the same guest that Christopher Lind here has on Learning Tech Talks the day before. Because next Tuesday, I believe, you have Matthew Daniel appearing from Guild Education. And then Wednesday, we're chatting with Matthew Daniel from Guild Education. So we'll just have to make sure I'll watch your show so it's not the same conversation we have, so you can come to both and get double the Matthew Daniel. Who doesn't want that?
If you want double Matthew, who doesn't want that? So if you want double Matthew Daniel,
great insights into a lot of what we talked about today around enabling opportunity and mobility in a frontline workforce. So it's going to be a great conversation. We're going to be doing it every 2 weeks on LinkedIn. So check us out. You can follow me or follow Axonify on LinkedIn to get more information. And by the way, Christopher here is going to be on the show too. We're going to flip it. So instead of him asking me questions, I'm going to ask him questions to find out what he's learned about learning technology by doing all these conversations to hopefully help y'all make more informed decisions when it comes to how you look at the
and I'll have
using
to
reality
of learning by then, because then you'll just have to. We'll have to figure that one out.
Yeah. But yeah. So check us out. next Wednesday, 11:30 on LinkedIn. And then if you have any questions or if I said anything that was potentially useful to you, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or email me, jdillon@axonify.com. I'm always happy to chat.
Sounds good. Have a great week, everybody, and thanks for joining.